Back here on Fight News Now with John Ramdeen and Robin Black. Lots to discuss regarding Bellator. First, we're going to go back to Friday night where they presented their first card of 2016. Paul Daly defeating Andy Ulrich in rather quick fashion, and then, of course, calling out Josh Koscheck, which is the fight that makes the most sense that they're going to be moving towards. But Paul Daly, this was largely a showcase for him, and he looked very good in this fight. Not much more to say other than that.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is you need quality competition. I mean, the playing field has to be level, and this, as you mentioned, it's a showcase fight for Paul Daly on television to go and knock out his overmatched opponent. Paul Daly faced off Nick Diaz, who fought for the UFC championship. Paul Daly should only be facing high caliber opponents, specifically guys that can stand and trade with him. So as much as I like this type of thing, you know, the Bellator organization, the reason they did this is so that when the fans left the venue, they're like, that crazy guy just got a crazy knockout, and they called it the blonde-haired guy. Hopefully we'll get to see that fight. I understand why they're doing it. It just, things need to be a little more even.
If only Bellator had someone who could fight at 170 pounds who was like fully developed. I agree with you. I mean, when you talk to Joe Silva, they do not make fights that are like, well, what if this guy beats that guy, and then we'll set up this thing, because they know that there's too many variables. Joe Silva and Shelby believe you put in the highest level of matchup that you can find, and the guy who moves forward is the guy. You can't control these things. If you try to control them, it doesn't work out. We wanted Koscheck and Daly. Next thing you know, they get to announce a new guy that maybe could fight either one of those guys. So it's the type of thing you don't want to see over-controlled, especially because this is a damage business. You know, with football, hockey, fighting, boxing, it's a damage business. And to send a guy in there overmatched, you're sending him in there to get hurt.
We don't want to overlook the fact Paul Bradley, Patricky Pitbull Freite, both with very impressive stoppage wins on Friday night. A very fun card to watch in Fresno. But on Monday, even bigger news coming out of Bellator, and that was first the statement from Benson Henderson, breaking his own news that he has signed with Bellator, and later Dana White speaking to John Morgan at MMA Junkie that they declined to match the offer made by Bellator for Benson Henderson, which is an interesting tactic in and of itself. I think this is a huge pickup for Bellator. This is somebody that Benson Henderson was never your blockbuster pay-per-view draw, but that person you could plug in at 2 weight classes, always a draw on television. I think a tremendous, entertaining fighter, and this is a great pickup for Bellator. And as Robin said, you could put this guy in lightweight or welterweight. There's many options with Benson Henderson.
The fact that he was a UFC champion, so if you're a fan of combat sports, he's recognizable. You know, Bellator's on free TV, so people
a number of good years ahead of him.
Exactly, and then on top of that, as you mentioned, can fight at 155 pounds or 170 pounds. What fights could he have at 155 pounds in Bellator?
Imagine Will Brooks,
Ben Henderson, Michael Chandler, Ben Henderson, Josh Thompson, Ben Henderson. There are so many great fights at 155 pounds, and then 170 pounds, of course, it's a work in progress. But as Robin mentioned, Paul Daly versus Ben Henderson, you get the stories there.
When it comes down to the fights, there's a lot of cool possibilities here. I was really impressed by the way Ben Henderson handled that. Like a boss. Goes in, gets the new deal, and leaves on such seemingly great terms. I mean, that's how you do it. If you could do that in your life, you know, you don't have to break up with the ex-girlfriend and call her names. She's a good person. You can move on to the new one with all the lessons you learned from that relationship. That's what it seems like he did. And, you know, hey, like you mentioned, the UFC chose. They had the ability to match, and they chose not to. When you look at these things, these are not things that we, the uneducated, are really qualified to debate. And the reason for that is because there are entire departments that are there to measure metrics that can literally say Ben Henderson is worth this many dollars to us when we air his fights compared to his contract, and this is how much value he is to our competition. And if the number is higher than this, we won't take him. If it's lower than this, we will take him. It's metrics. It's all done. It's analyzed by experts in business. These very highly intelligent people analyzed both perspectives and said that it was a better deal to be able to let him move on.
Scott Coker was also on the MMA Hour on Monday, and he noted just the obvious, the fact fighters, realistically, they have a real choice. And there's going to be many free agents that are going to come out. The focus now turns to Alistair Overeem, to a lesser degree, Matt Mitrione. There are 2 key heavyweights that Bellator could choose to go after. And now, when a fighter's contract is due, UFC can't retain everybody. And Bellator, when you're running all of these shows and you don't have a depth the level the UFC does, these are the kinds of pickups that can make a big difference. In this case, 2 weight classes, and this to me is going to be one of the bigger stories of 2016 is how Bellator can build up their various weight classes through free agency.
Yeah, and Robin and I were talking about it on 5 Rounds today about a guy like Aljamain Sterling, for example, who is, you know, I'm not necessarily saying he's the future of 135 pounds, but he certainly can be the future of Bellator's 135-pound division. Like, I would not be surprised to see Sterling and Alistair Overeem, considering Overeem's past with Scott Coker, and Coker's where he looks at the landscape of things, says, yeah, sure, we'll have you fight, and if we have no fight for you, we'll send you over to Ryzen to make some cash over there, or if there's an opportunity for you to fight in wherever, somewhere in Europe in a kickboxing match, go take it. So I think the things we've heard over the years is the relationship that the fighters have with Scott Coker and that he's a reasonable guy, and I'm not surprised that these moves are being made.
And when you're looking at these things, and I know as fans, these are huge talking points. These are things that people love to talk about with their favorite sport or their favorite athletic team or movies or whatever. This is a huge part of fan discussion, a huge part of our discussion. When you look at it, don't go, why did they make that crazy move? Go look, you know they made it for a smart reason. These are powerful, intelligent companies looking at and analyzing the entire landscape and how they're going to reverse engineer the choice. Look back at what are the evidence, what are the reasons they might have done it. And Paula can make a great point. Can't retain them all. So if we're going to get to choose who we retain by spending the money we need to on who we retain and who we allow to go, we're still in control of that. Bellator is not 1/10 the size of the UFC. They might become 1/15th or 1/20th if they make these moves, but these are all analyzed in war rooms by highly intelligent business minds.
As we close the chapter for Benson Henderson's UFC career, and the guy, I know he's talked about getting out of this sport at a young age. It's not inconceivable he could find himself back in the UFC one day, but for now that chapter is closed, and you look back at his volume of work in the UFC, 14 fights dating back to 2011. Of course, there were the Frankie Edgar wins, that extremely close fight with Gilbert Melendez, but I go back to just some of his work over the last year, stepping up to take on Brandon Thatch at 170 pounds. That was a tremendous fight. And most recently against Jorge Masvidal. I mean, this is somebody that has had an incredible library of fights that you can look back on during his UFC run.
Yeah, and that's why it's a great pickup for Bellator, because you've got a guy that can do a lot for you. In the sense that, okay, we need somebody to fight in this division. I wouldn't be surprised if Ben Henderson went up to 185 pounds because he's such a big athlete in the future, of course. But I think this is the reason why they picked him up is because there's so many possibilities. He's a proven champion, and the fact that he is a name, despite the fact I'm sure when it comes to pay-per-view, he wasn't the biggest draw. But
that's not a factor for Bellator.
That's not a factor, exactly.
I mean, this is someone that has a lot of exposure, and on Spike, a very big name in Bellator's pool.
This is a whole separate conversation, but one of the reasons that people hate Sage Northcutt is because he has such drawing power. We saw him lose, but nobody's talking about Brian Barberena. They're talking about him. Why did he lose? How did he lose? That kind of interest is powerful. He has something that a Ben Henderson will never have and never has had, and you have to make those choices, and it shapes how you sell your sport. It shapes how you make the sport. Spooky.
There you go. We'll probably know when Benson Henderson will step into a Bellator cage later on this year. For now, we have more fight news now coming your way.